Now we're going to look at the very interesting chart of Stephen Hawking's, very famous physicist. He was born January 8th, 1942, and in Oxford, England, and his time of birth was rectified to 10:23 a.m. So, if you looked at the eastern horizon when he was born, you would see the sign of Capricorn, the 10th sign of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, rising on that eastern horizon. We're going to look at how the planets are operating in his chart and when the planets are operating in his chart and what we could have done to rectify uh, his chart. So, first, we want to look at the functional nature of the planets. We know that any planet, any multiconal sign that falls in the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th house becomes functional malefic, as well as Rahu and Ketu. And so, the multiconal signs are 1, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And so we see in the no multiconal sign in the 6th house, but in the 8th house we see the 5th sign of Leo ruled by Sun. So that becomes functional malefic, which can cause some challenges in his life. And then we see in the 12th house the 9th sign of Sagittarius are ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter also becomes functional malefic and can cause some challenges. The other planets are all benefic planets. So let's look at each of the planets and how they're operating. So Sun, we know it's at 24 degrees, and it is functional malefic. Now, Sun, because there is no multicona sign in the 6th house, Sun becomes the indicator or the significator for his health. And it is ruling this house of research. So it is in the 12th house of prison confinement. And it's ruling this house again of vulnerability and research. So it brings confinement. He lived most of his life in a wheelchair, and his ability to be a leader in research. Sun also means leader. Now let's look at Moon. Moon is very weak. Any planet that is less than 5 degrees in adolescence cannot defend itself, and any planet that is greater than 25 degrees, like Venus and Saturn, are in old age and they cannot defend themselves, so they become weak. And so Moon represents working with the public and also the ability to teach. And it rules the 7th house of marriage and partnerships and comforts living and abroad. And so it gives, because it's weak, he had 2 marriages, 2 divorces, and it gives some partnerships in teaching, his ability to teach. Mars is at 5 degrees, and it's ruling this house of property, family life, and happiness. And it also represents courage and muscles. And it is in its own sign, so that gives it's really well placed and a good strength. However, this house itself is afflicted by Rahu. So any planet that's within 5 degrees of the ascendant and functional malefic can afflict 5, 7, and 9 houses away, like Rahu. And K2. And so Rahu is afflicting this house of happiness, and it's technically affecting Mars. So Mars is muscle. So he had this disease called Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS, which involved involuntary muscle movements. And so let's see, that's it. But he had great courage in his life, to overcome the obstacles of the Lou Gehrig's disease. Um, he and he inspired many people. So Mercury is at 4 degrees, ruling the house of good fortune and teaching, and is placed in the first house of life purpose. So his life purpose was to teach others. He had Mercury also is intellect. He had a very, very sharp intellect, brilliant intellect. And Mercury also represents nervous system. So the first house is afflicted by Jupiter. It's within 2 degrees of the ascendant. So, and it's 10 houses away. It afflicts, it's a functional malefic, so it afflicts 3, 7, and 9 houses, 10 houses away. So it's afflicting this house. So, again, uh, it's uh, it's bringing, this aspect of Jupiter, this though he had this good intellect and everything, he still had this, most of his life spent in a wheelchair, and his nervous system was compromised in the ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. So Jupiter is at 19 degrees. Remember, it's a functional malefic, also close to the most effective point of 17 degrees. 17 degrees becomes the most effective point of every house because it's the rising sign degree. And it represents wife and beauty, and it rules the 10th house of career. And it's in the first house, and it is aspected by Saturn. So Saturn, has to do with focus and commitment and hard work, and so he and it also represents the skeletal structure and longevity. So it rules the second house of fame, gave him fame and recognition, and but K2 is also let's see. Well, first of all, so back to Venus. Venus gives poetic speech, or beautiful speech. He was able to describe the universe in very beautiful and poetic terms. But because it's at 27 degrees in old age, it made his wives, the 2 divorces, the weakness of his relationships to his wife. Saturn is at 8 degrees in old age, weak also, represents longevity and skeletal issues, rules the second house of speech, and brings limited longevity and skeletal challenges because it's afflicted, this house is afflicted by K2. Rahu and K2 are again close to the most effective point within 4 degrees or less, and so they afflict 5, 7, and 9 houses away. So 6 out of the 12 houses are afflicted by Rahu and K2. Rahu gives desire because it's in this house of research, desire for research. And it afflicts Sun. Sun is his health, and K2 afflicts the house of health. So health is compromised by Rahu and K2, and see here. And it afflicts this house again of speech and the ability to eat food. This is also represented in this house. And so, yeah, those are the main things in his chart. Now, so what are the remedies that he could have incorporated? Well, he could have uh, transformed the functional malefic aspect of Jupiter by giving to spiritual organizations and listen to Vishnu chants, and Sun also, or Vishnu chants, and he could, or Ganesh chants for Jupiter, excuse me. I listen to Vishnu chants for Sun and help elderly men. He could have listened to Shiva chants for Rahu and Ketu, and Ganesh chants for Ketu, and helped people who cannot help themselves. And then he could have strengthened the rest of his benefic planets by wearing a kavash, which is a locket that contains the yantras for each of his functional benefic planets. So this is the very interesting chart for Stephen Hawking. Now let's look at when the planets were operating. So he got married during a moon period representing that is ruling this house of marriage. Got very important work published on black holes in 1988 during his Rahu period, which had to do with research. He got divorced in 1995 during a Saturn period, representing the stability or the longevity of his marriage. He died during a Saturn period, representing longevity as well.